Susan Gardner here for Municipal World. We're at the 2019 Fall Workshop for the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association. And joining me in the Municipal World Media Centre is Lauren Bernardi from Bernardi HR Law. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Great to have you back in the Media Centre for a conversation. We just participated in a session this morning around challenges for women in leadership and so on. And one of the things that we talked about was bias in our processes, unconscious bias. Let's carry on with that.
Sure. So unconscious bias is unconscious, right? That's the challenge. And we are all victims to unconscious bias. It is stuff that we see in the media, stuff that we grew up with, but we all have these biases that infiltrate the work that we do and how we respond to the world. And one of the things that we're talking about more and more is unconscious bias in the workplace and how it affects us. It affects women, and it affects people of any diverse background that don't fit into a very tight norm. And we do it to ourselves as well. So one of the things we talk about is female leadership, which is what our session was on today. And we have this idea of what leadership looks like, but a lot of it is defined by very stereotypical male norms that exclude many women, but also exclude many men. So we have this kind of narrow idea about what leadership looks like. Strong, sometimes tall, but charismatic, and all of these things that we desire or see as being important to be a leader, when actually there are many ways to be a leader. And so our unconscious biases cause us to maybe lose some great talent. Whether it's women or men or people from different backgrounds, that unconscious bias affects us.
You talked about this kind of concept of intersectionality as part of this, that, I mean, gender's part of it, sexual preference, race, religion, all of these things that kind of influence. And if you have more than one of these things in play, you experience, perhaps this bias in a much greater extent and much deeper level.
Absolutely. It's like compound interest. It's worse. So if you are a woman of color, it's even harder to break into the ranks of leadership. But anybody that's got this intersection of grounds that are protected under the Human Rights Code, we see all kinds of challenges in how they can rise into leadership roles, because those things act together. We have biases against all of these groups, and then you combine those biases, it makes it even tougher.
So we're kind of getting, an awareness of this, and but it's not enough just to have an awareness. I think you said this earlier today. Some of these things, these biases, are institutionalized in some ways.
Absolutely. So I think we have to think about each of the steps or each of the parts of managing people in workplaces and look for those hidden little barriers. So, for example, reference letters. We often see gender bias in reference letters. Reference letters for men tend to be longer than for women. There are words that are more about agency with men, strong, where women tend to be more communal words like independent or good interpersonal skills. Those types of things tend to be reflected more with women. So you see this imbalance. And I've noticed that even when hiring people for my own firm, because actually what got me thinking about it, it looks different, and started doing the research. And there are differences. There are differences in performance evaluations. There was a study that talked about how having a 10-point scale actually makes it harder for women, because men will be given the really strong adjectives like a 9 or a 10, outstanding, where women tend not to be. They might get a 7 or 8. But if you close the gap, if you make it, say, a 5 or 6 point scale, there is no difference. So it's looking at some of those things. Bias in looking at resumes. So a lot of organizations are starting to eliminate the names and then having somebody else look at it. That's not just gender bias, that's racial bias as well, where if we take out the names, then we're looking at the skills and the qualifications only, and we're not influenced by things that are extraneous.
So it kind of switches the focus from the person, some of those biases that are built into the system, and changes the focus more to getting the right talent and focusing in on what that is.
Yes, I think that's ultimately the goal. If we can eliminate these things that are lurking there that we may not be aware of, and you know, it's men, it's women, it's all of us. We're influenced by things that aren't really going to help us get to the right person. If we can make those conscious and start to work against them, then we will ultimately get the best talent in whatever job we're looking for. And that's really the goal, is it not? Like, let's get rid of all these things that are going to cause us to choose not the best person, and let's find ways to choose the best person.
What would you say is the most important thing for organizations that are serious about addressing this and addressing issues around diversity and so on? What's the best step they can take?
It's really about making the unconscious conscious. So talking about these typical barriers that we see, there's lots of great training programs out there, but actually having conversations amongst everybody about what does that look like, what do you see, how can we overcome it, and then calling it when you see it. So talking about, I've noticed, would you have said this if the person was, different than the person that you're saying it about? So I think that's a really important first step.
So one of the things that we talked about today was, sometimes women, everyone has a tendency to not say the things that need to be said. But really, if we're going to address this, we need to say the things that need to be said and do the things that need to be done to create the kinds of organizations that we want.
Absolutely. It takes some courage.
Yes.
It's hard. There's no question that it's hard. There have been many moments in my life where I've walked away from something thinking, I maybe should have said something that I didn't say. We just have to constantly try and put ourselves out there in a tactful, not aggressive. This isn't about, accusing people or polarizing. It's about having a conversation together about how we can affect positive change.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights today and for coming in to discuss more. So appreciated.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm Susan Gardner from Municipal World. With Lauren Bernardi, we share your stories.